So this evening's meeting is a program is a presentation on some of the history of Oregon State Highway number 21, or known as the Green Springs Highway, originally announced as the not the Dalles, but the Ashland-Klamath Falls Highway. We've known it more recently as Highway 66. And I'm always fascinated with this highway because as you go west, as you're leaving Keno, there's that sign that says Historic Highway next however many miles, 60 miles or so. And I've tried to find out, well, what does that mean that it's a historic highway? And I've asked some folks at ODOT, and they said, well, it's just an old highway. They didn't really know that it meant any kind of official designation or anything, but it certainly is historic, and it was dedicated as a new highway, a new state highway, the 21st highway in the state highway system in 1924, with ceremonies on June 3rd, 1924. So we got in touch with our colleagues, our counterparts at the Southern Oregon Historical Society based in Medford, and asked if they would like to partner with us in commemorating the centennial of this highway because it was such an important road. And so joining me this evening and representing Southern Oregon Historical Society is George Kramer. George, would you like to introduce yourself there?
Sure. Hello, everyone. As Todd says, I'm George Kramer. I live in Ashland. I'm not actually affiliated with the Southern Oregon Historical Society. I work with them a lot and have worked with ODOT on highways all over the state over the years. So I look forward to hear what you have to say, Todd.
Well, George, when we were talking with Anna and Jan at SOHS, they said, well, we're going to have to get George involved. So to that extent, you are paid by the Southern Oregon Historical Society to help us out with this. So appreciate you. And George is going to be welcome to chime in just whenever you want. We've got images from our collection. We've got images from the Southern Oregon Historical Society collection, and some other images that George has scrounged up in various places. And he really surprised me with a couple of his images that he submitted. So let's see. First of all, I want to acknowledge that sometimes you will see the word Green Springs as one word, but then sometimes you'll see Green Springs as two words. And it seems like more recently we've tended to see it as one word, but it is officially in ODOT records, two words, Green Springs. And so we only really came to that realization a couple of weeks ago. And so in our own materials that we've been developing, it's one word here and there, and we've been trying to go with two words more recently. We want to make an acknowledgement that there were indigenous peoples that inhabited this area for thousands of years before European Americans arrived on the scene, and lots of other folks as well. This area of the Green Springs kind of falls in between different areas, between the Klamath Modoc people and then other tribal groups downstream, the Shastas and others on the west side. And I don't know much about the tribal groups outside of I don't know a lot about our own tribal groups here in Klamath. But we do want to just acknowledge that we are in the traditional homelands of the indigenous people here. And let's see, I want to call up a photo that we used for our publicity here. This is an image, a postcard image that we bought on eBay here about, I don't know, a month or so ago. And let's see, I need to share my screen here so that everybody can see it. Okay, George, are you seeing our postcard image there?
I am.
Okay, very good. And so I don't know exactly where this is over on the west side, but you know, we saw that. I guess it's probably been 3 or 4 months since we saw that photo. Yes, sir. You know,
I'm pretty sure that's what we call Windy Point, right by milepost 14.
Okay, all right.
Is
Is
it Tyler Creek down on the left, and
Sure.
then Ashland in the background?
Very good.
Springs over the low ridge in the center.
Okay. Very good. Well, when we saw this image, I knew this program was going to be coming up, so we bought this image knowing that. And when I took a close look at it, I just had to admire the nerve of those people that drove that in the days before guardrails were put up. Now, one of the reasons that I thought this program needed to be done was not just because of the centennial of the dedication of the highway, but just always we like to recognize the fact that the Klamath Basin was isolated from major development happening across the Northwest because it was hard to reach the Klamath Basin well into the 1900s. Now, the Applegate Trail, of course, came across the basin starting in 1846, and there were a few thousand people that traveled through. None of them stopped to settle in the Klamath Basin. It was too dry, too cold here. As they were probably coming through in the fall of the summer, they could see that they weren't going to be able to grow tomatoes here in the Klamath Basin very easily. And so it was really in the 1860s before anyone tried to settle in the basin. And so even then, settlement took off slowly because it was still so hard to reach the Klamath Basin, even with teams and wagons and freighting and so forth. It was just hard. There were a number of trails and roads in the area, and I'll name a few, and George might be able to name a few more. There were during the Modoc War days, there were soldiers that came in over Bald Mountain. And then there was the Rancheria Trail that came up through like Shady Cove, that area, and on over the north side of Mount McLaughlin and along the south end of 4 Mile Lake, and then down into the Fort Klamath Wood River Valley. And then there was a trail that came down from like Central Oregon, and some supplies to Fort Klamath came by that route. But all of those routes had to close in the wintertime because the snow was just too much. So I see a few hands coming up here and there. And so here's what I want to try to do. I want to go through most of the program. If you could maybe jot your question down, and we'll come back to those. Boy, tremendous amount of interest in the Green Springs here, and that's really good to see. So we'll try to keep our program as short as we can, even though we have a lot to cover, and then have time for questions and discussions and corrections and arguments later on. George, anything to add on trails?
Just the military trail, that connected the forts, which Fort Klamath, of course, and then the forts in the Rogue Basin. But other than that, you got it.
Very good. So in the 1870s, a road was developed up the Klamath River Canyon, and boy, it was a tough road getting up the east wall of the Klamath River Canyon to get up on top. The road that became known as Topsy Grade and the Topsy Road. Their first road in the 1870s didn't work very well. And so in the 1880s, they cut a second road up the Topsy Grade. This is something I just learned about a few years ago. I didn't realize that there were two earlier Topsy roads besides the one that we drive now. Alan, everyone here is just telling me about it recently that he drove that road. The 1880s version of the Topsy Grade didn't work either. And so they had to make a third attempt to build a road up the Topsy Grade into the Klamath River Canyon and come on up through Keno. And that's the Topsy Road that we drive today. And so that was our best road through the late 1800s and into the early 1900s because it was the lowest elevation. And so the most likely to be free of snow a good part of the year and would dry up early and so forth. But boy, it was a hard road to bring freight on. And so as soon as the folks of Linkville got their town going here, they started asking for a better road. We were part of Jackson County at the time. And so we had to persuade the Jackson County commissioners to spend money and time on a road coming into the Klamath Basin over what we now call the Green Springs. Of course, the Applegate Trail cut across there in the 1840s, but there needed to be a better road. And so the citizens of Linkville and others of the Upper Basin here petitioned the Jackson County commissioners. And so with money and oomph from Linkville, the Southern Oregon Wagon Road came to be, and it basically more or less paralleled the Applegate Trail. We've got an 1875 survey that shows that. And we'll see if I can gain the technological prowess to advance my photos here. So this is that 1875 survey. Thanks to Joe Young, a advisory board member with our museum here, who has a lot of background in surveying and engineering. He neatened this, I think we had like a negative version of this, right, Joe? And Joe found a better version that we can use. So this is township 39 South, range 5 East. It's a township of 36 square miles. This western side of the map here is the Klamath-Jackson County line. And as we zoom in on the bottom part of this map, we can see that the surveyors marked here the old Immigrant Road. You'll see immigrant sometimes spelled with an I and sometimes with an E, but it's the Applegate Trail, or the southern branch of the Oregon Trail that we're talking about. The ones that the Applegate brothers and Scott, I think, was one of the other primary partners in that trailblazing effort of 1846. And so then also the Southern Oregon Wagon Road, which was built around 1869 to 70, I think, they're both shown on this 1875 survey that we have here. And so we're just very fortunate to have that map that was created and has survived. Now, then the next type of map that we have is the good old U.S. Geological Service topographic maps. And someone took, I believe this is a 1955 geological survey map, and they just took an ink pen and jotted on here where the Immigrant Road is. And notice here, I guess they weren't sure how to spell it, so they spelled it with an I here and an E. That's the way I do things, so that at least half the time, right? And so on this map, you can see where the Immigrant Trail comes down off of Chase Mountain and crosses Highway 60 here, just east of Topsy Reservoir, what used to be Topsy Reservoir, and then crosses a little bit south of Spencer Creek. And then they show here with their ink drawing where the roads vary. There's a spot here called Parker Station, and then it continues on with the roads parting ways again. You know, we can compare these two drawings here just to see how accurate were they in 1875, and then how accurate were they in whenever they did this 1855 map. I hope I can figure this out here and get two screens going at the same time. So the computer is being a little bit glitchy here. Let's see if we can drop this down and call up the old 1875. All right. And so if I do a little more finagling here, we can get both these maps maybe to line up. Well, what I'm trying to show here is that the roads overlap here by Parker Station, and that's where they overlap here. And then the old Immigrant Applegate Trail Road goes off to the north here, and that is reflected in the drawing here. So this is the technology that was available in 1875. I'm always amazed at what those surveyors could do in the 1800s using their solar compasses and whatever they had. I've never really figured out how any of it works, and someday maybe Joe will give a program on all of that. I think that'd be a great program. Those surveyors that were out there in wild, remote, trackless country, man, they were brave individuals. And then in the 1950s, you know, I think what the U.S. Geological Survey did in the late 1800s and 1900s with their topographic maps is pretty amazing. But you know, the technology continues to evolve. And so Joe was kind enough to work up a map in Google Earth. And so I want to share that with you. Joe, why don't you stand up in the back there so that we can give you proper credit. Joe works out at the air base, and he joined our museum advisory board, I don't know, a year or two ago or something like that. And he was pretty quiet and never said a word until I started talking about surveying and maps. And so, oh, let me help you with that. And so he went into Google Earth and created a layer here where you can see Highway 66 in yellow. And then the red line is the Immigrant Trail, the Oregon Trail. And so you can see where he has it crossing. Is this based on that 1875 survey? Yeah. Okay. And so there's actually a Klamath County Historical Society yellow rail marker right here near the Spencer Cemetery. And so you can see the point of all this is just to say that Highway 66 more or less parallels the Applegate Trail and the 1870-ish Southern Oregon Wagon Road, not perfectly, but it was the one spot where they figured that they could get wagons across the Cascade, the southern end of the Cascade Mountains, and down into the Rogue Valley. There was only one good spot to do it, and all three of the roads pretty much followed that same route. The fun thing with Google Earth and with the computer being a little bit overloaded, this may not work too well, but you know, you can swing this around and get an oblique view. And I'm not very good at it because I obviously need to play with the computer a lot more to get good at it. And it always rotates backwards from what I think it should. But if you get in low enough, you can kind of get you can pretend that you're a raven following the emigrants on the trail. And I had a friend of mine say one time, don't you bet Lewis and Clark wish they could have had something like this technology back in the day, because you can see where the hills are that they have to go around. Is that the double S turn? I'm not quite clear. I didn't look at the map quite closely enough. And here's a pretty good sized hill they have to go around. And then you can see a big canyon coming up here. And if we get in close enough, that's where the famous Jenny Creek slide is, where they had to rope up the wagons and drag logs and, you know, do all kinds of things to try to keep the wagons under control going down the east side of the Jenny Creek Canyon. So probably enough about comparing the different roads. Let me just mention now that what we want to get into is automobile travel, because it was in the early 1900s that automobiles started to appear various places around the country. The first automobile to make it to Klamath Falls was in 1906. But even then, we were still a horse and buggy town through most of the 1900s and into the teens. A few more cars started showing up, but the roads were so bad. Here, Paul last fall portrayed a guy in our Night at the Cemetery program that drove a car around Upper Klamath Lake, and it took him like all day or something, right? Yeah.
Long day.
Yeah, and had some terrible creek crossings and that kind of thing. And so it was with automobile travel in the Klamath Basin. Oh, here's a picture of that Parker Station. That was a waypoint where teams, stagecoach teams or freight teams could change horses, and if they needed to, teamsters could lodge for the night. And the Historical Society has a yellow rail marker at the site where that house stood. It's somewhere out there north of Highway 96. We can get you the coordinates for that if you'd like. In the 1970s, the Klamath Echoes included a series about the Applegate Trail, and this hand-drawn map was included in the Klamath Echoes. So this was the technology that was available to the Historical Society around 1970. Not the greatest, but it's what would fit on a page of the Klamath Echoes. And so you can see here they've got Highway 66 marked here, and then the Emigrant Trail. Here's the Jackson County line. Pinehurst is marked on there. Okay, not the greatest map. Let's move on. So now that we have people driving around in automobiles, we need some better maps that people can fold up and try to fold up, right? And carry in their car with them. And this is a map that George provided. Do you want to comment on this one, George?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
Okay.
Sure. This is from the 1924 Oregon State Highway Commission report. They would do them biennially. And they just were basically showing progress on all the roads. What's interesting about this map, you can see that they focused in on the Pacific Highway, the main route north and south, where most of the population in the state lived. That was the first route to be paved. And that's why it's red. They had graded the road around Crater Lake. That was a tourist attraction, but roads like 66, the Green Springs, were basically still just dirt. It was graded, which was a big improvement for cars, but it was not anything like what we would consider a modern road. It was basically an elaborate wagon trail.
The numbering system that you see on here You don't see 66 and 97 and I-5 or anything like that. You'll see that the red line here, the old Pacific Highway, is highway number 1. That was Oregon's first major state highway. Highway number 2, it goes up the Columbia River Gorge. Highway number 3 kind of comes down the west side of the Willamette Valley. And so what do we have here? Our good old Highway 97 is highway number 4. And if you go to the ODOT office out here, they talk about highway number 4. They don't call it 97. They still use their original numbering system. So Highway 97 is highway number 4. And here you see that our highway that we're talking about tonight is number 21. And then the Kramer Lake Highway right after it, number 22. So we've got a few maps here, and guys, George, it's already 25 after 7, so we'll have to move fast. I don't remember if this is your map or mine. I think this one might be mine.
Yep.
So here you'll see the number 4 for our highway, but it's also got 97 on it now. So the numbering system came in. I'm not sure when that was. I saw a comment on Facebook about it. Somebody seemed to know when the numbers, the route numbers came along. And so here on the Green Springs, we've got the number 21 for the state number. And notice that we've got 97 here. There was a time when 97 hadn't yet made it across past Midland and through Doris. And so, well, this is a little bit off topic, but notice highway number 4 here goes off towards Merrill, Malin, and down the east side of Tule Lake. That's because highway number 4, originally known as the Dalles, California Highway, came from the Dalles through Bend, Klamath Falls, and then on down to Lookout and into California that way. So 97 for a time went this way. So this would have been before they opened the road to Doris in the 1930s. The bridge across the Klamath River by Columbia Plywood was opened in 1936. Sure.
I just want to interject that on that topic, that first of all, everybody should know that Oregon was the first state in the nation to figure out that using tax on gas to pay for roads would be a good way to improve roads. And every other state in the nation adopted that policy after we did. The difference between the 97 and the 21 is 21 is a state highway route number, 97 is a federal highway route number. After the Bureau of Public Roads was created, they provided funding. And so if you designated a road, or if the feds designated a road as a federal highway, you got federal funding to improve it. And that's why it has 2 numbers.
Yeah, and then of course we've got our county road system too with its own set of numbers, but we won't go quite into that. Notice here that it shows the Topsy Road coming up from Hornbrook and Beswick or Beeswick, and coming up the Klamath River Canyon. For a few years, that road was a designated state highway. I don't know what the number of it was or anything, and I don't think that lasted very long. As soon as the Green Springs Highway opened, then the Topsy Road wasn't used much anymore. This is a Chamber of Commerce map, I think from 1930, and I cleaned it up a little bit just to call out here that we've got the Green Springs Summit, the Green Springs Mountain Summit shown here at 4551. That'll be one of our stops on our June 1st tour. And then the Hayden Mountain Summit is the other high point on the highway, not quite a mile high, 4695, but still a lot lower than, say, Willamette Pass or even Lake of the Woods, farther south and a little bit lower. And so a better way, better place for building a highway, and that's just an uncropped version of that map. So here's a little bit more modern map. This is probably like from the 60s or so, and this probably looks more familiar with what we see during our lifetimes. But we've got some of our features on this map that we're going to talk about on our June 1st tour that I hope you all are going to come on, because we're putting a lot of work into that tour. So hope to see you all out there. We'll have Judge Richard Rambo at Keno. He's stationed, been staffing a station there for us in different events. And we'll have someone from Pinehurst. Is there anyone from Pinehurst here? Yeah, okay. Are you one of the owners or married to an owner?
I own the Pinehurst Inn. And I don't know who's gonna be manning the station. It's not me. It's probably my wife.
I think it's your wife.
Neglected to tell me. Who neglected to tell me.
All right, and we're also gonna have someone at Klamath Junction. That was the spot where the old Highway 66 ran into the old Pacific Highway, Highway 99. And so at that junction, the Klamath County Chamber of Commerce put in quite an effort to get people to turn off there and go on north by way of Klamath. By the time this map was published, a new highway was put in, and George probably knows more about this than I do, but I believe this is the new Highway 99, the new and improved. It's not I-5 yet, I think. So, but the Klamath Junction has been bypassed now. It's no longer on the main highway. And so that didn't work out too well. Now the junction is down here, and well, it just didn't work as well for the Chamber of Commerce effort. And that again is just an uncropped version of my map. Now, getting into automobile travel, I want to kind of set the stage here for how fast traffic moved in the 1920s and how fast we would like to see you move on June 1st. 1920s speed, okay, around those curves over on the west side of the Green Springs. This is a clipping from the October 4th, 1919 Evening Herald newspaper, talking about a wreck that happened to a young man who was driving back from the county fair that was held out in the Henley area. His speed caused a bad smash up. The driver's name here was Joseph David, who nearly cost him his life. As he was coming back from the fair, witnesses said that he opened up the throttle and hit a pace that many declare was over 40 miles an hour. 1919. So by 1924, probably traveling even a little bit faster in those days when the Green Springs Highway opened up. Another comment about our local highway system. This is a story also from 1919, and Carol Mattis will recognize this story about Constable Fred Morley, our local law enforcement officer here in Klamath Falls, who was called on to go to Bend to pick up a couple of people charged with a theft in the town of Crescent. But being in January, you can't get from Klamath Falls to Crescent in 1919. And so the story here says that in the summertime, it's easy for auto stages to make that trip in a day, it says, in the summer season, but the winter snows make it impossible. And so this is 1919 now. Klamath County, Klamath Falls is still a hard place to get into and out of. And if you were caught here when the snow fell, even in 1919, you might be stuck for the winter. You could buy a train ticket because the trains ran, but even in 1919, getting out of the Klamath Basin in the winter months was extremely challenging. And so Officer Morley had to buy train tickets and go south 80 miles to Weed, get on the main line of the Southern Pacific and go north to Portland, east to the Dalles, catch another train south to Bend, a trip of, I think they said how many hundreds of miles it is in days to make that trip, pick up his two defendants, and then make the trip back around to get back to Klamath Falls, which was only about 150 miles from Bend, but it took several days to make the trip in the winter. That's why we need the Green Springs Highway. And that's why it's so important for us to get this highway opened in 1924. Here's a picture in our museum collection that was labeled as someone who is trying to drive across the Green Springs. This is before the highway. I mean, judging by the vintage of this Ford here, what do you think, Paul? 19 teens?
Yeah, early teens, maybe a 12, 11.
Yeah. This is Paul's Model T that's parked out here in this parking lot, by the way, and which you will see at the summit of Hayden Mountain a week from Saturday. Hopefully, if all goes well.
I've got lots of bailing wire.
And now we've got duct tape.
What year is his car?
What year is your automobile out here?
1923. So it's 1 year before the Green Springs Highway opened. Would be very typical of the cars that made the journey early.
Here's a story from the Evening Herald newspaper about the Mile High celebration for the opening of the Green Springs Highway. This is published May 24th of 1924, so a couple of weeks before the highway was to open. Now they're calling it a mile-high celebration. Now we know they were stretching it a little bit, right? Because what was the elevation, 46 something? Right. But wow, look at the lineup here. They're expecting Lynn Sabin, the Secretary of the Chamber of Commerce, is going to be involved. 4 excellent short addresses are assured. Governor Walter Pierce, R.A. Booth, who was a highway commissioner in the years in those days. There's a wayside named for him over in Lake County. I'm not sure exactly where that wayside is. I think, is that the one that's just west of Lakeview?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
right. And some other dignitaries. Yeah, that's right. The Ashland Concert Band is going to provide music. There's going to be 2 refreshment stands, one provided by folks from Klamath Falls and another from Ashland. So big plans for the highway celebration. Here's an ad that appeared in the paper a few days later. This is May 27th, 1924, an ad from the Klamath Clothing Company. Yes, the KKK store. Yeah, that's a whole nother program. Well, we can explain that, but at any rate, their ad just simply says they're gonna wear them. Get your big hat for the celebration that's gonna happen on the Ashland-Klamath Falls Highway at Hayden Creek Meadows. Now, here's where I have to invite anyone that would care to help us out. We know where Hayden Mountain is, and we know where the Hayden Mountain summit is on the highway, but I've not been able to figure out where Hayden Meadows is.
The next low spot to the west.
Right on the highway or a little bit off the highway?
The creek goes under the highway there.
Okay, so Tom and
It's,
Martin sitting next to you there.
Half a mile.
Let's get on Google Maps and try to pinpoint that a little bit after the meeting. Takes a couple of foresters to help us out with that. But anyway, you can see that at least the Klamath Clothing Company is pretty excited about this celebration coming up. Here's an article that appeared in the paper. Now this says that it was in the paper on June 3rd. And that was, as I understand it, the day of the celebration. But here's part of what got me enthused about this program. The headline here, on top, halfway between Klamath Falls and Ashland, amid the tall and uncut beauty along the new $1 million, wow, $1 million highway. Can you imagine? Now I think highways cost like $1 million per mile to build or something like that. And then this beautiful photograph and a great caption here, which is too long for me to read, but really just talking in glowing terms about what a beautiful roadway this is. And I was struck by this photo that doesn't reproduce very well. This is how it appeared in the newspaper, and this was the best scan that I could get. But then just yesterday, George Kramer surprised me by sending me this image. George, where did you find this?
As I said, I used to do a lot of work for ODOT, and ODOT's archives has photographs of things that really don't exist anywhere else. And this was part of a series of a photo in the ODOT archives. It was a panorama photo, actually. The original was probably 6 inches tall and maybe 18 inches wide.
Amazing detail. You can see people sitting in the back seat, and it looks like a little child sitting in the front seat there. I'm guessing that's a child. And what kind of automobile is this? A Buick. Okay, very good. Clyde, I'm not supposed to take questions. Is it quick?
Are those Ponderosa pines on here?
Mostly, yeah.
It looks like it from here.
Yeah, just an amazing stand of timber here. And you can see the highway going off. This, I believe, is at Hayden Mountain Summit. I believe, Paul, this is where you're going to be, just almost exactly right here, a couple of weeks from Saturday. But nice find there, George. Thank you for sharing that photo with us. Taken by Stinson, a Klamath Falls photographer, And Hauger was the automobile dealer here in Klamath Falls that provided the automobile. Now, I don't have this confirmed, but in our collection, we have this photo that was labeled as being the ceremony that they had on the day, June 3rd, 1924. And anybody recognize this guy? Yes, Captain O.C., Captain Oliver Cromwell Applegate, the local historian who was fought in the Modoc War, had a kind of a patchy reputation there for a while, became an Indian agent, eventually became like a hero among the Klamath peoples, and lived until a ripe old age and finally passed away in 1938. But here we see him speaking as he did for almost any dedication of anything here in Klamath County. They would call on Captain Applegate to make a speech. But remember, we want short speeches for this ceremony. It looks like by the posture of some of the folks here. It looks like the afternoon was wearing on. All right, we've got a series of photos of the new highway. Some of these we had in our collection. Some I think came from George, maybe, I'm pretty sure. Some of them came from Ron Brown. Anybody remember Ron Brown from KDRV, a news anchor for I don't know how many years, 20 some years, and a longtime board member of the Southern Oregon Historical Society, and a great fan of history of the region. He did a series that went on for years of historical features of the basin, and unfortunately passed at too young of an age here just a few years ago. But before he passed, he made visits here to our museum and said, I want you guys to have these pictures of Algoma, where his Urine family ancestors had lived. And you remember them? What's that?
He was born in Algoma.
Oh, what? Ron Brown was born in Algoma. So some of these pictures are from his collection. And so this shows our highway somewhere out about halfway between here and Keno. You can see this hill right here is that hill out by Stuart Lennox where what's his name built the house up on the hill. Cedar, yeah, Keith Cedarleaf. And that's Hogback Mountain right there way off in the distance. And I wonder if any of you recognize this spot right here. That's coming, who said that? Yeah, very good. I've got that called up here on Google Maps, I believe. So here's Stuart Lennox, and right here is Fairhaven School. And on this curve right here, we'll get a street view. And if the computer works right, we'll spin this. Oh, I didn't click in quite the right spot. Let's move a little bit farther here. And there is that same view right there. I think I can pull this down here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Isn't that amazing?
That's very
Yeah, we came across this photo a few years ago and we had no idea where that picture was taken. I studied on it like for, I don't know, a few weeks, and then finally, it's Stuart Lennox. Yeah. You know this spot, right? Right along the highway west of Keno. If you're the passenger, it's okay to look. You can look out your window and see that view. The timber's grown up there now, and it's kind of hard to see that view, but it's there. Unfortunately, the spot was used as a dump for many years and occasionally still is. By unfortunate, ignorant souls who want to dump their trash there. The old Weyerhaeuser Railroad line is cutting across the hill there in the background. I believe this is in that same area, headed up that hill west of Keno. We got so many of these kind of pictures, I don't want to take too much time here. This is identified as a spot 12 miles west of Keno. I couldn't quite figure out where this opening was. I don't have that one figured out. Maybe we can.
It looks like right across from the Or you go shoot.
No, sportsman's park.
Yeah, sportsman's park.
It does look kind of like that, but I think it's farther, I think it's west of the river, somewhere.
I know exactly what that opening is, because we used to go out there and stargaze and set up telescopes.
I bet, actually you're thinking about the same spot I am, but I don't think it's that spot because the 12 miles doesn't line up there. Somehow this got into the collection. This looks like a paved road here, and so I'm just gonna skip that. But several more photos showing the timber that you drove through back then. Gabby, you probably sawed some of those logs at one point or another. Bill Anderson here was head sawyer at Weyerhaeuser when they closed down. Here's another postcard image. This one's not real clear because it came from a postcard. We've just got so many of these, you know. This was a highway that people were proud of. And so we got lots of pictures of tall, uncut, beautiful timber. And then we started going down the west side and lots of beautiful photos here. And when we did a post on Facebook here about a week ago about tonight's program, how many of you see us on Facebook? Any Facebook followers here? A lot of comments about people terrified of this highway. Driving along the edge here.
That's my place.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think, is that the spot they call the viewpoint there?
I think that's
Great photo.
George, did you have something on that?
No, I was just saying to myself, that's a great photo.
Yeah. I want to take a minute to talk about this photo. I believe this is, that's the reservoir site, right? Keene Creek Reservoir,
Yeah.
I believe it's called. I want to look at that in Google Earth too. Here, I know this is taking a little bit of time. You guys all know this turn right here around this beautiful little reservoir here, right? It's a very picturesque spot right there where I mean, here's where you got to slow down to like what, about 15 or so to get around this curve. But if the computer clarifies the image here, I believe the old bridge is still there, right?
Yes.
And I believe if we click on the street view here, and spin our view around here, there's that old bridge still down there. See, it's a timber bridge. I believe that's our bridge, isn't it?
It looks pretty old.
And I hope I don't end the Zoom meeting by accident here. That's the kind of thing I would do. I don't need this window. Wow, George, I don't know how to get you back here. I guess I can start closing out windows. Sorry about my lack of expertise here. Anybody got a high school kid? All right, so here's our original highway bridge over this creek. Is this actually King Creek here?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And those posts holding up the bridge are still there. So I think it's the same bridge.
Yeah. That kind of stuff is fun. You know, anytime I'm driving a highway and I can see where the old highway is, I'm immediately fascinated by where that old highway went. I wish I could drive on some of those old highways, you know. We can't because we still got most of the old highway. Here, all right, now we're nearly down at the bottom end and we're about 3/4 of the way through our program. And so hang on, folks, and we'll wind it up here. This is way down below, getting pretty close to Ashland here, close to the Klamath Junction. Got a couple of construction photos that we found in the ODOT archives. Imagine working your way across that hillside with this bucket that, what do you suppose that holds? 2 or 3 yards, maybe? I don't know. I am no judge of volume when it comes to earth moving. But you know, this is one of those kind of drag line type buckets where you would swing your bucket in and lower your boom down, and then cables would pull the bucket forward and scrape up material, and then you would hoist your boom and swing it around and then dump. And then go back and do it again. for day, hours, weeks, months. I don't know how long the construction
They're pretty sure
went
that
on.
tree is still there.
I think so.
We got one other construction photo, and I believe it shows that same machine. You can see the grade here that's being constructed. And off in the distance, hopefully we'll be able to get there. You can see your steam, I believe it's a steam powered machine, and that looks like stacks of firewood there piled up to fire the boiler. And yeah, the highway you drive next Saturday, constructed with steam power in the day. All right, so we're going to wind up now with some things that you can expect to see if you come on our tour on Saturday, June 1st. Judge Rambo will be at Keno. He is a descendant of Robert Whittle, who had the ferry that operated at Keno before the first bridge was built. And he's got some kind of a deal. I don't remember the details of it. You'll want to hear it from Judge Rambo, retired Circuit Court Judge Richard Rambo. Something about how his ancestor sold someone the ferry operation, and then he built the bridge and put the ferry something like that. You want to get the details. You want to get the details from Judge Rambo. But this bridge was built, as I recall, somewhere around 1930 or so, and was a beautiful arch bridge. It stood until what, 1980-ish, I do believe, and was replaced by the bridge that we see at Keno today. We posted this photo on Facebook the other day, and this is the sign that you saw as you were headed south out of Klamath Falls. You went up Riverside Drive and came to the junction with 66, and there was a Y there, not an interchange or anything, just a Y, and you could either go south across the new Highway 97 bridge by the plywood plant, Calpine, is that what it was called at the time? Or you could head west, and notice that they put the most distant towns at the top, which is the opposite of the way we do it now, right? So 9 miles to Keno, 60 miles to Ashland, and then points beyond. This is an image a little bit out of order, and I couldn't get it fixed before tonight, but here's an advertisement from the Evening Herald of 1925 for the Log Cabin Poultry Farm, which was located 7 miles west of Keno to Spencer Station. Where was Spencer Station? We know Spencer Creek was named for the Spencer family, and there's this old Spencer Cemetery is out there, but I could not figure out where Spencer Station was. Laura Wilt, who is the soon to retire archivist at the ODOT Library in Salem, helped me solve this mystery a couple of weeks ago when she sent me a map, and I believe that's one of the links I have here. So we have a map here, a Google map, with Keno off to the right there, beyond the edge of the map. Here's the Sportsman's Park, Topsy Reservoir, former Topsy Reservoir. We're going on west, and here's that clearing that I think we were talking about. But I don't think that was or whatever I was talking about 5 minutes ago. What was I talking about? This is where Spencer Station was. This is that opening that you see where there's an old abandoned ranch house out in the middle there. And there's a residence, an active residence here. And so somewhere right in this Spencer Station, an ODOT highway maintenance station, which lasted for just a few years, was right in this opening right here. So love to see those kind of things. Oh, we've got comments here that I haven't seen. Sorry about, I haven't been monitoring the chat because I'm flying solo tonight and don't have a tech, but I'll look at the chat comments here before we quit tonight. Okay, back to poultry farms were all over the basin back in the day, and you could buy your fryers and your hens and your roosters and all that at different poultry farms. And somebody had an operation out there with McRae cockerels for sale. One of our, this isn't going to be a main stop on our tour, but we have it called out on our map, Penny Springs Guard Station. This is a spot where in the 1930s you could stop and get your permit to go out in the woods in those days. If you were gonna go out and wander around in the woods, you had to check in with the state forestry office and get your permit at Penny Springs. So this just operated for a few years in the 1930s, and then it was eventually abandoned, the buildings disappeared, but the flagpole still stands there. And so I encourage you to take a minute and stop and pull out there. I got that up on Google Earth, but I'll show you later if you're old enough to see exactly where that spot is. In the 1990s, there's a group of people that wanted to preserve some of the old sugar pine trees along the Green Springs Highway. Local resident here, John Ward, was a key part of that. And here's an old Herald and News newspaper. I forget what, it's 2014. It's 10 years ago. A newspaper reporter went out and interviewed John about the effort of the Friends of the Green Springs to preserve some of these old pine trees. When I was out scouting the highway just a couple of weeks ago, I came across this nice stand of big timber here. Tom, Martin, you guys missed this stand here. This didn't get
Belongs
cut.
to the state.
It belongs to the state. You're right. The state of Oregon still has a 5-acre rock pit out there near Hayden Mountain Summit. And they've got some beautiful timber on that. And I have petitioned ODOT. And I expect all of you to sign my petition, which I don't have ready yet, that piece of ground needs to become a scenic byway. And put some interpretive signage there. And so I want to show you this spot on, I'm pretty sure I've got this one called up here. This is Hayden Mountain Summit. So Paul is going to have his Model T parked right here at the summit. And so is this opening right about in here where the meadows?
That's the meadow, right?
Yeah, okay, very good. And so that stand of timber, I think, I'm pretty sure I can just find that real quick and it's gonna be really cool. Just wait for it. There it is, right there. You can tell it's a big patch of dark green there. You got some old timber in there. And the ODOT rock pit is right in there. So we'll do a street view here, I hope. I need to move my window, it looks like. A little bit. I think you'll like this. So here's that view of timber. I mean, that's a sugar pine right there. And look at the width of that tree compared to a lane of travel here. That thing is about a DBH of probably 4 to 5 feet, I'm gonna say. I don't know, but let's spin this image around here now. That's not one of the pine trees that were saved by the Friends of the Green Springs, but that one right there is. That is a nice big old sugar pine tree. You can tell by the branches that stick way out, and then pine cones, the big old sugar pine cones hanging down from the ends of the branches there. You can spot a nice sugar pine from a mile away, and there it is leaning out across the highway. That's one of those sugar pines that they preserved back in the 1990s. See, we're closing in on an hour here, but we're nearly done. Just a few more images to tease you with for the June 1st tour. We're going to have someone stationed at Camp 4. Our museum curator, Matt Vocal, will be there at Camp 4 and talk about the role of Highway 66 in development of things like the log cabin poultry farm and access for all kinds of industry and recreation. Of course, Weyerhaeuser was a railroad logging outfit. And all of these, well, you can see the rail line going right across here. We'll show photos of how they moved these buildings from Camp 3 to Camp 4. Matt will be talking about all of that at his station. And then here's your spot. What's your name, sir?
I'm Don Roulette.
No, are you Don Roulette Jr.?
I am Don Roulette Jr.
Don Roulette Sr. is a fine man. I am pleased that I got to know him. And so this gentleman is the owner of the Pinehurst Inn, and his wife, as I understand, going to be there on our tour day to talk about it. Now, the Pinehurst that we know is actually in the background of this photo.
Right,
That's
the one there.
That's our current Pinehurst photo. I didn't know until about a month ago about the old Pinehurst Inn.
I used to go through that.
Look at that.
Back then, that was the Pinehurst Inn, and the one across the street was the Pinehurst Lodge. And then
Oh.
the big one that we're looking at now burned, I think it was in 71 or 72. And they renamed it, the one across the street where I live now, to the Pioneer Skin. And that's just a view from the east of the old Pioneer Skin.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And I've been in it.
I wish I could take the tour, and I'll be at Topsy Reservoir. Here's Lincoln. Many of you are probably familiar with the town site of Lincoln. We're not gonna have that staffed because, believe it or not, Southern Oregon Historical Society said we've got bigger things to talk about than the town of Lincoln. But the old town of Lincoln was a mill town, and those are some of the old mill buildings. They're now occupied by a branch of a university from back east, and we'll have some information about that. Here's a spot on the west side where there was a landslide in 2017-ish. And they had to do quite a bit of study to figure out how to keep that part of the highway together. And you can see even in this Google Street View image.
They fixed it now.
Oh, is that right? It's been all moved over. Okay, for now, anyway. Here is Klamath Junction. Really wonderful history. When they opened the Green Springs Highway, the Klamath County Chamber of Commerce established a building there with free touring information, Klamath Falls, Crater Lake official information, and they had an exhibit building there, all done by Klamath people at the Klamath Junction. We're going to have a Southern Oregon Historical Society is going to have a person staff as close to this site as they can. This site is now underwater at Emigrant Reservoir, Emigrant Lake, I guess it's called. But you'll be able to turn off of Highway 66 onto the old highway, original Highway 66, and you'll be able to get to where there's a little parking lot and a trailhead there, and you'll be able to look down in the water and see where this spot, you can imagine where this spot used to be. There's the exhibit building. One of our other points of interest is the Mountain House. George, do you know much about this building?
Oh, yeah.
We're just past an hour now, so if you want to just give us the 30 seconds.
So I actually was involved when this was listed on the register, and we laughed that they wanted to turn it into a bed and breakfast. And I wanted their slogan to be hospitality at the base of the Siskiyou since 1851. This was established by 3 single men at the intersection of 3 land claims. And it was basically after you had come down the Jenny Slide and past Tub Springs and made this harrowing trip. You could stop here, rest your horses, get a dinner, spend a night, and it was basically a lodge where they would refresh your horses, sell you a chicken. It was quite the big deal. It was one of the first frame structures, first log structures and first frame structures at this part of Ashland. And it's still there.
Yeah, I think either Jan or Anna said that when you came down off the Green Springs on the Applegate Trail, this was like the first building home that you saw.
Yeah. And the 3 men there had come over that road, that route. And I think they all just sort of figured, wow, there's an opportunity to help travelers here and make some money. And they did really well.
This is about a half mile or so off of Highway 66. It's not going to be one of our main stops, but we are going to have it identified as another point of interest. If you follow our map on Google Maps, you can take your phone with your device and you'll be able to download a map and follow along, and this will be identified as to where that is. It's a beautiful place that you might want to go check out. Another point of interest is going to be, I think it's called the Dunn Hill Cemetery. Also part of which had to be relocated when they expanded Emigrant Lake some years ago, and it's a very picturesque cemetery you might want to visit. And then finally, right on the edge of Ashland is another historic home. We couldn't figure out a place to park anybody, so we can't make this a stop. You could maybe do a slow roll as you go past it. I think it's right where Dead Indian Memorial Road comes into 66.
On the Klamath side.
Into Ashland, this old house. And George, you know about the history of this place?
It's the Giles house, Giles. And he was another homesteader. That's him standing out front. And it's, like I said, it's on the Klamath side of the intersection of 66 and Dead Indian Memorial Road.
It's kind of concealed by brush and trees and stuff, and so it's a little bit hard to see, but it's just fascinating to think that whole place has been there that long. I believe that might be
Giles Wells. It's the Giles Wells house.
okay. I realize now that we skipped over Tub Springs. That's going to be a major stop. And Steve Mark, if you want to unmute yourself, you can introduce yourself. He's going to be, Steve Mark is actually a Fort Klamath, the town of Fort Klamath resident, and retired historian at Crater Lake National Park, and active volunteer both in our museum and at Southern Oregon Historical Society. And Steve, you're planning to be at Tub Springs on June 1st, is that right?
I am.
Steve, is there anything that you need to correct, any egregious error that I made this evening?
Well, I just sent a couple things through chat, but they were just
Oh,
minor.
okay. All right, I'll call those up and you're ready to turn people loose here. We're going to repeat this program Tuesday night at the Ashland Public Library. Tell your friends in Ashland either to don't miss it or find something better to do, whatever you want to tell your friends. But we do have a map of our tour route available in paper form. It looks like this is the last copy that I have here, but you can download the map. We reserve the domain name greenspringscentennial.org, and you can download this map and print it at home, or you can access a map on Google Maps and follow it along with your device as you're traveling on June 1st. And you can see in detail exactly where all of our stops and points of interest are. So I can see that people are ready to go, and I'm not going to hold us up any longer. I know there's probably questions, comments, corrections, arguments, and I welcome them all. But I am going to just say that we're going to conclude our presentation here tonight. Thank you for coming, and feel free to come up with any questions. I forgot to acknowledge, thanks to our partners at the Southern Oregon Historical Society, Laura Wilt at ODOT, the late great Ron Brown, Joe Young for your help with all this. And again, thanks to Anna Sloan and Jan, Jan's last name, basically George, do you remember? Jan.
Right.
Jan Wright. Okay, thanks everyone.